You're not the hunter, you're the one being hunted. Alien Isolation doesn't scare you by overwhelming you with monsters or constant action. It does the opposite. It strips you of power until every movement feels like a risk, and every sound feels like a warning. The Xenomorph isn't just an enemy, it's a presence, something that adapts, learns, and lingers just out of sight, forcing you into a constant state of tension, where survival depends on patience rather than skill. And that's what makes this game so effective. It doesn't just tell you you're vulnerable, it makes you feel it, trapping you in a situation where you're always one mistake away from being found and never truly sure if you've been safe at all. And what makes that vulnerability so powerful is how consistent it is. Alien Isolation never breaks its own rules to give you comfort. There's no moment where you suddenly feel in control, no turning point where the fear fades into familiarity. Instead, the game builds its horror on uncertainty, on the idea that no plan is ever foolproof and no hiding place is ever guaranteed. You learn the systems, you adapt, you think you understand how to survive, and then the Xenomorph changes. It forces you to question every decision you make. It's this constant tension between what you think you know and what the game refuses to confirm that keeps you on edge. It turns even the smallest action, opening a door, stepping into a hallway, checking your monitor tracker, into something that feels dangerous. Because Alien Isolation, safety isn't something you earn. It's something the game lets you believe in right up until it takes it all away. It isn't something Alien Isolation tells you outright, but it becomes impossible to ignore the longer you play the game. You are never really in control, not in the way most survival horror games condition you to expect, where knowledge becomes power and repetition turns fear into familiarity. Instead, Alien Isolation quietly dismantles that expectation piece by piece, replacing it with something far more unsettling. The idea that control is an illusion you're constantly chasing but never truly holding on to. You can learn the layout of Sevastopol Station, memorize safe routes, understand how you think the Xenomorph behaves, and even anticipate certain patterns, but none of that ever translates into real security. Because the moment you start to feel comfortable, when your movements become just a little bit more confident, when your decisions feel just a little bit more calculated, that's when the game pulls the ground right from under you. The Xenomorph doesn't follow a script you can master. It reacts, adapts, and shifts in ways that keep you second-guessing yourself. It forces you to question whether your next move is actually smart or just something that feels safe. And that distinction between what feels safe and what actually is safe becomes the core tension of the entire experience, turning even your best decisions into potential mistakes waiting to happen. What makes this loss of control so effective is how subtly it is enforced, not through brute force or constant punishment, but through the slow erosion of trust in your own instincts. In most horror games, fear diminishes over time as you learn the rules. Once you understand how enemies behave, how the systems work, and what the game expects from you, that initial terror starts to fade. It is then replaced by a sense of confidence that lets you push forward without hesitation. But Alien Isolation refuses to give you that luxury. Every system in the game is developed and designed to feel reliable just long enough for you to start to depend on it, before revealing the cracks that are underneath. The motion tracker, for example, feels like a lifeline, a tool that gives you information, awareness, and a sense of control over your surroundings. But even that comes with uncertainty, with blind spots, delays, and the ever-present risk that what you're seeing isn't the full picture. Hiding spots feel safe until they aren't, routes feel clear until they're suddenly cut off. Even silence, which should mean safety, becomes something you start to distrust, because in the absence of sound, that doesn't mean the absence of danger. It often just means the opposite. And as these small doubts begin to stack up on top of each other, something shifts in the way you play. You stop acting with confidence and start acting with hesitation, consistently weighing your options, constantly questioning your decisions, and constantly aware that no matter what you choose, there's always a chance it's the wrong move. And over time, that hesitation becomes the defining rhythm of the experience. It reshapes not just how you play, but how you think while you play it. You begin to slow down, not because the game tells you to, but because moving quietly and quickly starts to feel reckless, almost irresponsible in a space where every sound carries and every action has consequence. Even something as simple as walking becomes a decision you consciously make, weighing speed against noise, progress against exposure, constantly asking yourself whether advancing is worth the risk it introduces. That internal dialogue never really stops, it just evolves. It becomes more cautious, more paranoid, more aware of the invisible system working against you. And that's where the illusion of control finally breaks completely. Because you realize that no matter how carefully you play, no matter how much you learn, you're still operating within a framework that can and will turn on you at any moment. You're not mastering the game. You're not negotiating with it. You're trying to survive within the rules that feel consistent just long enough to betray you. It forces you into a mindset where control isn't something you gain, but something you briefly borrow before it's taken away again. What elevates Alien Isolation beyond just another survival horror experience is the way it transforms the xenomorph from a simple threat into something that feels disturbingly intelligent, something that doesn't just exist but actively works against you. It isn't just that the creature is unpredictable, it's that its unpredictability feels purposeful, as if it's responding specifically to you, learning your habits, adapting to your tendencies, and slowly closing the gap between where you are and where you think you can hide. The illusion of intelligence is so convincing that it begins to reshape how you interpret every encounter, turning what could have been a mechanical system into something that feels personal. You stop thinking in terms of enemy patterns and start thinking in terms of being tracked, hunted, and studied, as if every mistake you make isn't just a failure of execution, but a piece of information that the game is using to tighten the noose around you. And because of that, the xenomorph never feels like something you're dealing with. It feels like something you're trying to outlast, a presence that grows more oppressive the longer it lingers, forcing you into a defensive mindset where survival isn't about winning, but about delaying the inevitable for just a little bit longer. This is where the game's design becomes quietly brilliant, because it doesn't just rely on the xenomorph's behavior, it relies on how that behavior makes you behave in return. The more you hide, the more you rely on certain tactics, the more you try to outsmart the system, the more the system seems to shift in response. It creates a feedback loop where your own strategies start to feel compromised. You begin to notice patterns, not in the xenomorph itself, but in how your choices seem to influence its presence, and that creates a kind of psychological pressure that few horror games ever have achieved. It is no longer just about avoiding detection, it's about avoiding predictability, about trying to stay one step ahead of something that feels like it's constantly learning from what you are trying to do. And that pressure, it builds slowly, but relentlessly, turning even successful escapes into temporary victories that offer no real sense of relief. Because deep down, there's always that lingering thought. If it found you once, it can find you again, and if it's learning from you, then every second you survive might just be making the next encounter that little bit harder. And what makes this even more unsettling is how the game subtly encourages you to humanize that intelligence, even when you know, logically, that it's just a system. The xenomorph begins to feel less like an algorithm and more like a presence with intent, something that isn't just reacting, but choosing when to appear, when to wait, and when to strike. You start to assign meaning to its behavior, interpreting pauses as patience, movements as decisions, and encounters as deliberate confrontations rather than random outcomes. That psychological shift is crucial, because it transforms fear from something external into something internal, something you carry with you, shaped by your own perception of what the xenomorph might be thinking, might be doing, might be planning. And once that shift happens, the game no longer needs to constantly show you the threat to maintain its tension. The idea of the xenomorph becomes enough. Its potential presence fills every room, every corridor, every moment of silence with a kind of invisible pressure that never fully goes away. You are not just reacting to what's in front of you, you're reacting to what could be, constantly anticipating a threat that feels just like it's one step away from revealing itself. What truly defines the horror of Alien Isolation isn't just the presence of the xenomorph, but the feeling it leaves behind. The constant, suffocating awareness that you are never alone, even in moments when nothing is happening. The game understands that fear isn't sustained through action, but through anticipation, through the slow build-up of tension that comes from knowing something could happen at any moment, even if it hasn't yet. And that's where the idea of being hunted becomes more than just a gameplay mechanic. It becomes a psychological state. You start to move differently, think differently, even breathe differently, treating every space as if it's already compromised, every sound as if it's already been heard, and every decision as if it's already being judged by something just out of sight. The environment itself begins to feel hostile, not because it's filled with constant danger, but because it might be. And that uncertainty turns even the simplest of actions into sources of undeniable stress. Opening a door isn't just progression, it's exposure. Crossing a hallway isn't just movement, it's risk. And staying still, which should be the safest option, becomes its own kind of danger, because waiting too long feels like inviting someone or something to find you. Over time, that pressure doesn't fade. It compounds, layering itself over every moment until the act of playing becomes less about navigating a space and more about enduring a feeling. You are not just avoiding the xenomorph, you're carrying the weight of its presence with you, even when there's nothing there, even when the game gives you brief moments of quiet, and those quiet moments don't feel like relief. They feel like tension stretched undeniably thin, like something is being held back rather than entirely removed. That's what makes the experience so draining in a way that goes beyond traditional horror. It forces you to remain in a heightened state of awareness for extended periods. It never allows you to fully relax, never allows you to fully separate yourself from the danger. You are always listening, always watching, always waiting, and that constant vigilance becomes exhausting in a way that feels intentional. As if the game isn't just trying to scare you, but to wear you down. Because when you're exhausted, when your focus slips, when the patience becomes thin, that's when mistakes happen. And in Alien Isolation, mistakes aren't just setbacks, they are invitations. The game doesn't just simulate the experience of being prey, it conditions you into it. It teaches you to think like something that's vulnerable, something that's being watched, something that can't afford to make mistakes. And that conditioning lingers, extending beyond individual encounters and embedding itself into the overall experience until even every moment you play feels uncertain, like they could collapse at any second. Because once the game has convinced you that you're being hunted, it doesn't need to prove itself anymore. The feeling stays with you, shaping every action, every decision, every moment of hesitation, until being hunted isn't just something that happens in the game, it's something that defines it. Alien Isolation doesn't rely on shock, spectacle, or overwhelming force to create fear. It builds it slowly, methodically, by placing you in a position where control is uncertain, intelligence feels real, and safety is never truly guaranteed. By stripping away the power fantasy that most games depend on and replacing it with vulnerability, adaptation, and constant pressure, it creates an experience that isn't just about surviving a monster, but about existing within its reach. You're not conquering anything, you're not mastering a system, you're not overcoming a challenge in the traditional sense. You're enduring, reacting, and hoping that your next decision doesn't lead to the moment where everything begins to fall apart. And that's what makes the game so effective. It doesn't just show you what it's like to be hunted, it makes you feel it over and over again until that feeling becomes the entire experience.